Biden administration is reportedly considering bringing in Gazans to the U.S. as refugees. American media reports suggest that Biden is mulling providing a permanent safe haven to some of those who are fleeing the war-torn Gaza. Revelations that the U.S. media claims it has discovered from internal federal government documents. In recent weeks, senior officials across several federal U.S. agencies have discussed the practicality of resettling Palestinians from Gaza who have immediate family members who are American citizens or permanent residents. One of the options has also been regarding the United States Refugee Admissions Program, a decades-old program in the U.S. to welcome Palestinians with ties to America, those who have managed to escape Gaza and enter the neighboring Egypt. Now, these plans would, of course, require the coordination with Egypt, which has so far refused to welcome large numbers of people from Gaza. But the larger questions are, why is the United States thinking about it now? And if it does happen, how much would it impact the geopolitics of the war, as well as the policies surrounding refugees around the globe? To talk more on this, I'm joined by Ashok Sajjanhar. He's a former ambassador. I'm also joined by Parvez Memon. He's a senior partner at MZM Legal LLP. Good evening and namaskar to both of you gentlemen. Ambassador Sajjanhar, let me start with you. These are still reports, these are still proposals that are being talked about, but what do you make of them? Why would United States want to do this now? Does it have something to do with the fact that this is an election year and Joe Biden has a lot of pressure domestically as well to stop supporting the war?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shreya, for having me on your show. Yes, I think you're very right. I think what Mr. Biden feels is that he has his back to the wall because there have been so many protests against his policy of supporting Israel, whether it is not only militarily, but politically, diplomatically, financially, in terms of the weaponry, equipments, armaments, sending out these two the ships, the aircraft carriers onto the Mediterranean Sea. So in every sense, the United States and President Joe Biden has been supporting Israel. You would recall that very recently, President Biden had also mentioned when the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was visiting Washington, D.C., in the White House on the South Lawn, he had said that our guarantees for the protection and security of Israel are ironclad. So this policy of his has been getting a lot of pushback from particularly from the younger community, from the student community, from the Democrats, liberals, progressives, and from the Arab Americans, because we know that in the universities, many of them are, of course, very radicalized, but also the numbers of foreign students, and particularly from West Asia, that is pretty significant. The number of foreign students is close to 50%. And there is a huge funding of many of these universities by governments like Qatar, and there have been reports that there are others also who have been supporting. So the policy, there have been protests, there have been demonstrations against Mr. Biden's policy. So I think to placate some of these ruffled feathers, maybe he is going out and sending out this message that we are very concerned about the condition, about the hardship, about the misery that the Gazan refugees are going through. But then, of course, the numbers are huge. And how will these numbers, who are the people who are going to be selected? Because once this happens,
which is what my next question was, Ambassador Sajjanhar. And let me take this across to Parvez. Parvez, how does this work out legally? There are huge numbers of displaced people in Gaza as an after effect of the war. Egypt has to be involved in this. There are certain specifications that the United States is mulling over. One of them being that you'll have to have permanent residents or relatives in America. How does this work out legally, really?
Well, Shreya, firstly, thank you for having me on the show tonight. I would want to make 5 brief points on the subject. According to me, firstly, this is too late and too little. Late because the conflict in the region is going on now for about 8 months. and now the US has risen to the occasion. And little because the conditional grant only to those who have relatives in the US would mean hardly 1 or 2% of the survivors in Gaza to get refuge in the United States. Secondly, according to me, it is ironical and hypocritical. Now, on the one hand, you are supporting Israel to continue bombing in Gaza, and on the other hand, you are portraying mercy on the survivors of such attacks. Shreya, if you go back to the history, the irony is that the United Nations had settled the Jews during their persecution in Russia and Europe into Palestine as
Hmm.
refugees, and now they are giving refuge to the Palestinians. Shreya, nobody likes to leave their country and live like a refugee in a foreign state. The better course for the United States would be that to mediate and de-escalate the war situation in the Gulf region. Further, as you rightly said, that it is now merely at a discussion stage. And as we see that US is going into elections in the next 2 to 3 months, in November the elections are slated. If Republicans were to come to power, we
Hmm.
all know what the fate of such discussion would be. Nevertheless, any right step in a right direction is always welcome. I expect that the other nations like the UK, the European nations should take cue to it, and then there would be any significant, reprieve to the people in Gaza.
Okay. Uh, Parvez, what I'd asked you is that legally, would it be a more convenient, smooth process, or this leads to a lot of more and other complications to get Gazan refugees to United States and involving Egypt in it?
Well, definitely, there are too many complications to it. As I said, it is purely a discussion stage. Secondly, Egypt will have to be taken into
Hmm.
confidence. Thirdly, the conditions imposed by the United States are such that it is very difficult to satisfy them at this stage, because I don't even think that there would be many refugees who have relatives in the United States. So I don't foresee any
Hmm.
significant reprieve to the people in Gaza at this stage. There are too many legal ifs and buts, and discussions may take further shape here on.
Okay. Okay. Ambassador Sajjanhar, Joe Biden might be thinking of domestic benefits with this kind of a move if and when it does pass. But United States is already seeing protests against immigrants. Now, of course, immigrants and refugees are different groups, but with the kind of crisis that you're seeing there, would the local Americans want another set of people coming from outside and settling in there? And in the context of how Parvez said, rightly, that the US is being hypocritical in supporting the war and then getting Gazans into the United States territory.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya, for this question. Very important question. Before responding to this, if you permit, I'll just make one comment on what Mr. Menon has said. And on one of the points, I agree with
Hmm.
him that hopefully, if the United States start bringing these, refugees from there to the United States, maybe it'll send out a similar message to some of the other countries, and particularly, I would say, in the neighborhood, particularly to countries like Egypt, to countries like Jordan, to countries like Saudi Arabia, to countries like UAE. Because as he mentioned, who would like to leave their homeland? So when they are moving to Egypt and Jordan, etc., they are not going far away from their homeland. Their culture would be the same, their eating habits would be the same, their climate would be the same, their attire would be the same. So they'll feel much more at home in those regions, in those countries, than they would in faraway places like the United States, where it might be very cold for them, in certain areas. United Kingdom, where it's always cloudy and you don't see the sun, and they are all used to seeing the sun in Gaza, etc., etc. So the question that you are making, the question that you have posed, Shreya, is that how will this be seen? Will it be seen hypocritical? You see, the point I would like to make here is that it is not a one-off action that the United States or Mr. Biden is planning to do. I think you need to see that over the last 6, 7 months that this war has been going on, Mr. Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, has traveled to the Middle East to try and get a ceasefire. This is the 8th time that he's there. So I think no one needs to doubt the seriousness of the United States that it wants a ceasefire. Meaning, at the moment, its writ does not run so large as far as Israel is concerned, as far as some of the others are concerned. So it is trying to persuade all of them. It has been in touch with Egypt. It has been in touch with the government of leadership of Qatar that they should, try to bring all the concerned parties together. And of course, there is also the question of the release of the hostages, which is a very important question. So I think all these things need to be resolved. And the government, in my view, whatever I have read and heard, don't have any direct information on this. Whatever I have seen is that the government of the United States is leaving no stone unturned and trying very hard to see that the war comes to a stop, that there is a ceasefire. But then, of course, we cannot negate what happened on the 7th of October and which has resulted in the present situation. Shreya.
Which is the ironic part, Ambassador Sajjanhar and Parvez Memon, the fact that the US has suddenly woken up in the past few months and suddenly they want the ceasefire to be done immediately and, all that support going to Palestinians and Gazans specifically. But Parvez, how do you see this moving forward? There are a lot of displaced people in Gaza, homeless people, and understandably, like you said, nobody wants to leave their homeland, leave their home country and move to other shores. But unfortunately, they have to. But how do you see this now really panning out? And how do you see countries around the region really dealing with this sort of a crisis?
Well, Shreya, I see this as a silver lining. There is a ray of hope. It is the first steps towards right direction. If everybody had to follow the queue and if the situation is to be de-escalated as early as possible, it is in the best interest of the humanity to save the world.
Okay. Ambassador Sajjanhar, your last comments. How do you see this moving forward? Of course, nobody wants war, but clearly Prime Minister Netanyahu is in no mood to either agree to the ceasefire, some sort of relief there, or end the war at all. He's in fact, in the latest, vowed to carry on with that invasion on Rafah as well.
I think one, again, silver lining, if I could put it, that there is no, this conflict in that limited area, Shreya, has been happening over the last 6-7 months. But there has been no escalation. There has been no, expansion of this to other countries, to regional countries. Now, we know that as far as Iran is concerned, in my view, it has been trying to provoke and incite the countries of the region, the Muslim Arab countries of the region, that they should also get involved because this is a fight for the homeland of Palestinians. But none of them have taken the bait. And it is, when we saw that Iran fired all these 320, 330 drones and missiles on Israel, that issue has also been so far at least, it has been sorted out, it has been kept under wraps, basically by the advice, I think, as far as United States is concerned, because I think we need to recognize that United States currently might be a diminished power, but still it is the most important power if peace is to be restored as far as this region is concerned. So I think these efforts that are going on, that we have peace for ceasefire for 40 days, release of hostages, I think we build on those steps and then we try to have a much more permanent ceasefire. Because if we have for 40 days, extended it by another 20 days, another 20 days, I think it becomes much simpler rather than starting with a complete ceasefire, which it might be difficult for Israel to agree at this stage. Shreya.
All right, we'll leave it there, gentlemen. Ambassador Sajjanhar and Parvez Memon, thank you very much to both of you for joining us on Nation Tonight and sharing your perspective on this very crucial proposal that the US government is reportedly mulling over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.